We all live by faith. Both Christians and non-Christians live by faith. And wherever there's faith, there's always at least a sliver of doubt. And most of the time, working through our doubts is a normal and healthy process. It often results in stronger faith. But there are ways we can respond to our doubts that are not helpful, that don't lead us to more clarity or more confidence. There are ways that lead us into darker, more destructive ways of thinking. And so last week we started talking about the question, what does it look like when doubt goes bad? When doubt gets the best of us? And I said we were going to address three general categories of doubt gone bad, three different ways we move away from God instead of towards Him. And the first one, which I addressed last week, is called skepticism. The skeptic is someone who says, I'm going to suspend judgment. I'm not going to commit myself because the demand for sufficient evidence has not yet been met. Now, it may sound objective or rational, but the dynamic that's going on beneath the surface in the skeptic is this. I don't want to be wrong. I don't want to be hurt. I don't want to look like I'm one of the gullible ones. And underneath the surface of the skeptic is fear. A fear of being disappointed. And so when you move into full-on skepticism and you get stuck there, that's one way that doubt goes bad. Now, a second way that doubt can go bad is what might be called cynicism. I don't know about you, but I often have cynical thoughts running through my head. And unlike skeptics, people driven by cynicism aren't looking for answers. They're busy offering conclusions about the world that paint it in an entirely negative light. Like the glass is always half empty. Life's not fair. People can't be trusted. Circumstances typically get worse. Good things only happen to other people. Do you ever think like that? Because of previous pain or disappointment, cynics make conclusions about life before the questions have even been asked. And beyond just seeing what's wrong with the world, cynics often lack the courage to do something about it. Beneath the surface is a fear of accepting responsibility. A biblical example of cynicism comes from a man named Pontius Pilate. In Jesus' day, Pontius Pilate was the highest ranking official in Judea. He was educated, powerful, and possessed great authority. And when Jesus, a simple carpenter, was brought before him and claimed that he could testify to the truth, how did Pilate respond? Well, he said in John 18:38, what is truth? What is truth? How can you really be certain of anything? What kind of knowledge do you think you have? What kind of difference do you really think you can make? Why don't you just stop trying to save the world and all this trouble will just go away? See, Pilate is not so much seeking answers as he is trying to avoid responsibility. We see this clearly in Matthew 27:24. It says, when Pilate saw that he was getting nowhere, but that instead an uproar was starting, he took water and washed his hands in front of the crowd. I am innocent of this man's blood, he said. It is your responsibility. I'm washing my hands of this. This is now someone else's problem. As a person in the 21st century might say, whatever. Whatever. People try to wash their hands of a lot of stuff in life, don't they? To avoid responsibility for it. In case something doesn't go well at work, we decide it'll be someone else's fault. The boss or a subordinate. We pass the buck and wash our hands of it. In case something goes wrong in a relationship, we decide up front that it'll be the other person's fault. When facing a difficult decision, a moral responsibility, or a choice that may be unpopular, cynics choose to wash their hands of it in advance. And they just conclude, whatever. Or worse, when facing some of life's most difficult questions, does God exist and does he call me to live in a certain way? If there's even a shred of doubt, cynics choose to wash their hands of it. What is truth anyway? Well, the danger of cynicism is that this isn't an answer. It's just a clever way to avoid the question. Let me give you a hint about how to move beyond cynicism based on what Pilate didn't do. Where you feel cynical, it's probably an area of life where you need to take responsibility. When you feel like saying whatever to a world that's broken and messed up, take that as an opportunity to start dealing with your own indifference. Find your holy discontent and take action. When you feel like saying whatever to people who act hypocritically, take it as an opportunity to start dealing with the facade that you may be wearing. You'll be less paralyzed by cynicism if you begin looking inward and you take responsibility. So there's skepticism and there's cynicism. But there's an even more destructive road that doubt can lead us down. The third category of mismanaged doubt is what the Bible calls unbelief. Unbelief. And this is the most severe kind of doubt gone bad. Now, I'm defining unbelief as a refusal to trust. A refusal to trust. It's not when one has uncertainty in the intellect. It's a settled decision of the will. The condition of a person in unbelief is not just that they don't believe, it's that they won't believe. Like they don't want the story of Jesus to be true. They don't want to live in a universe governed by the kind of father that Jesus trusted and described. They want to be the God of their own life. They want to choose their own path and live by their own moral and ethical standards. And this desire goes so deep that it colors the way they look at every argument and every bit of evidence. They find ways not to believe it. You know, when witnessing to unbelievers who have lots of questions, Christian apologist Josh McDowell would ask them this question. He would say, if all of your issues and questions were answered and every intellectual barrier you raised was dismantled, would you follow Jesus? And he says that quite frequently the person will say no. To which McDowell responds, then yours is not truly an intellectual issue, but a matter of your will. Many atheists and agnostics will raise countless intellectual objections, but the reality is they don't want it to be true. They're afraid of being accountable to an all-knowing, all-powerful God. You know, the famous atheist Aldous Huxley once made this frank admission about his anti-theistic motivation. He said this, I had a motive for not wanting the world to have a meaning, and consequently assumed that it had none and was able, without any difficulty, to find satisfying reasons for this assumption. He says the philosopher who finds no meaning in the world is not concerned exclusively with a problem in pure metaphysics. He is also concerned to prove that there is no valid reason why he personally should not do as he wants to do, or why his friends should not seize political power and govern in the way that they find most advantageous to themselves. He said, for myself, the philosophy of meaninglessness was essentially an instrument of liberation, sexual and political. The dynamic here is that the person is afraid of losing control of their own life. So they'll just defy whatever evidence supports Jesus as Lord. You know, ironically, the best example of flat-out unbelief in Scripture is the Pharisees. Like, no matter what Jesus did, they rejected him. If he cast out demons, they said he did it by the power of demons. If he healed, they doubted it. I mean, they were steeped in unbelief because they didn't want Jesus to be the Messiah. And that colored everything they thought, everything they did. John 12:37 says, even after Jesus had done all these miraculous signs in their presence, they still would not believe in him. Notice it says, would not believe. See, that's a choice of the will. Over in John 5:40, Jesus said to them, "You diligently study the scriptures because you think that by them you possess eternal life. These are the scriptures that testify about me, yet you refuse to come to me to have life." Did you catch that? They refused to come to him. That's another choice of the will, right? Now, this brings up the most important question you can ask when it comes to the search for faith. What do you want to be true? Now, the reason this question is so important is that if you want to, you can find ways to explain away all the evidence. The existence of creation, stories of answered prayer, the overwhelming evidence for the resurrection, testimonies of changed lives, the unmatched wisdom of Jesus, and even that tugging and longing of your own heart for grace and forgiveness and meaning and heaven. See, if you want badly enough not to believe, you'll find a way not to believe. But that's not honest doubt. That is unbelief. See, we all have doubts and uncertainties. That's part of being human. But the big question is how we respond to those doubts. To doubt does not mean unbelief. Let me say that again. To doubt does not mean unbelief. In the Greek, doubt means a kind of suspension or being in two minds. It means you haven't come down firmly on either side of an issue. Like you're in limbo, examining, thinking, weighing the options, wavering between two things. Doubt is the state of believing and disbelieving at the same time. Like the man who said to Jesus, "I do believe, help my unbelief." Mark 9:24. Frederick Buechner once said, "If you don't have any doubts, you're either kidding yourself or asleep." Doubts are the ants in the pants of faith. They keep it awake and moving. I like that. You know, a good biblical example of people who had doubts but remained faithful would be Abraham and Sarah. I mean, Abe and Sarah are both commended in the New Testament for their faith and their faithfulness. But they certainly had their doubts about when and how God would actually give them their promised child. Some of you know the story. They're in their 90s, and after years and years of promises made by God, finally God comes to Abraham and makes an announcement. Okay, this is Genesis 18:10-15. Then the Lord said, "I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah your wife will have a son." Now Sarah was listening at the entrance to the tent, which was behind him. Abraham and Sarah were already old and well advanced in years, and Sarah was past the age of childbearing. So Sarah laughed to herself as she thought, "After I am worn out and my master is old, will I now have this pleasure?" Then the Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh and say, 'Well, I really have a child now that I'm old'? Is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return to you at the appointed time next year, and Sarah will have a son." Sarah was afraid, and so she lied and said, "I didn't laugh." But he said, "Yes, you did laugh." I love this little conversation. Like Sarah was afraid, and so she lied and said, "I didn't laugh." But he said, yeah, you did laugh. Sounds a little like two kids going at it, right? Did so, did not, did so, did not. Sarah was caught in that tension, though, between doubt and faith. Like she was laughing and doubting and wondering. And you'd probably be doing the same thing. But she wasn't resisting in unbelief. And that's why I think she was later commended by God. In fact, she looked back at that moment of doubting laughter and memorialized it by naming her son Isaac, which means laughter. Sarah said in Genesis 21:6, "God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me." I'm sure Abraham and Sarah had their fair share of laughs about this. I mean, they'll laugh at a baby being born in a neonatal unit and Medicare picking up the tab, right? They'll laugh because Sarah will be the only one in the grocery store buying Pampers and Depends for the same family. They'll laugh because they're all eating Gerber's baby food now because no one has a single tooth among them. They'll laugh because they waited so poorly and they doubted. But because they remained faithful, God showed up anyway. You may find yourself in a place where you're wrestling with doubt and uncertainty and feeling too bitter or broken to trust. And now all that's left is a feeling of skepticism or cynicism or just defiant unbelief. Yet you may also be wondering, is this all there is? Well, as long as you have the breath of life, you have the opportunity to move toward God and trust, to seek the God who's been searching for you. I love the way Eugene Peterson kind of transliterates the famous passage, Proverbs 3, 5-6. This would be sort of his commentary, if you will, on these verses. He says, trust God from the bottom of your heart. Don't try to figure out everything on your own. Listen for God's voice in everything you do, everywhere you go. He's the one who will keep you on track. Are you listening to God, or are you still trying to figure it all out on your own? I mean, don't you want to trust from the bottom of your heart this God who loves you so much? Well, my question as we close is, what's stopping you? What on earth is stopping you? Is it cynicism, skepticism, defiant unbelief? Whatever it is, let me urge you to put down those defense mechanisms and give God a chance. Have a great week, my friends.